Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. How can we find peace and happiness amongst the chaos of this world? As social media and increasingly the entire internet embraces the worst kind of censorship, it truly does seem like the algorithms are trying to excise a part of the complete human. For instance, Instagram just deleted our 10-year-old account with 40,000 followers, something I'll be talking about a bit more in an upcoming podcast. But these bogus copyright claims, the shadow banning censorship, and now just outright deleting our accounts, this is something that's been happening to the leaders of health and fitness for quite a few years now, to be honest. And frankly, it's something that we're all going to have to rise above. So what can we do? How can we find that inner peace and keep our cool while these technocrats bury and censor us in a dangerously lazy attempt to control all of our minds? Well, today I'm pleased to say that we're here with Stewart Dixon, a modern-day mindfulness teacher, musician, blogger, and author of the #1 bestseller and award-winning book, Spirituality for Badasses. If you're a badass and you like Zen, steak, and Chuck Norris, this is the show for you. Now, before we get there, my wife and I recently got back from an epic trip, driving our truck and trailer across the country to Florida and back, hitting up Big Bend National Park on the way home off the grid for a while. It's been really nice to decompress and catch up on quality sleep. And as we all know at this point, if you're running low on sleep, life gets a lot harder. There's nothing like catching up on solid shut-eye when you really need it. But with all the devices and distractions of the modern world, sleep is still one of the most overlooked subjects in maintaining our health and happiness. If you're not getting enough sleep, it's important to know that when sleep is restricted, even just for a few days, the hormones that regulate our appetite and metabolism take a massive hit. This lack of sleep sends cortisol and growth hormones out of whack, decreases leptin production, and increases ghrelin production. This unfortunate combo leads your body to believe that it's in a state of famine. You become ravenous, gain weight, and actually can become predisposed to metabolic dysfunction down the road. So what can we do to improve the quality of our sleep? Well, limiting artificial light in the hours before bedtime is a big one. But in the age of endless text messages, never-ending Zoom meetings, and Netflix binges, limiting artificial light after dark can seem near impossible in real life. Since my wife Allison and I have been working on computers and screens almost exclusively for many years now, that's one of the reasons we started experimenting with blue blocking glasses now over a decade ago. As I dug into the science and tried dozens and dozens of lenses, I discovered that most blue blocking glasses out there are not up to snuff. In fact, the majority of blue blocking lenses on the market use a nearly clear coating, which is only capable of blocking a narrow spectrum of blue light and has little to no effect on the most damaging spike of blue light in the artificial screens, which is usually pumped out somewhere around 455 nanometers. Now, the good news is that we've partnered up with a team of specialists to create Wild RX blue blocking glasses, which uses a patented process using melanin pigments built directly into the lenses. Our new lenses help block and protect your eyes better while allowing you to see the other colors more clearly. I really hope that you dig them. The first people who ordered are already getting them in their hands. I can't wait to hear what you think. And a lot of you who are just hearing about our Wild RX project who wear prescription glasses are asking, can you do prescription lenses with Wild RX? And the answer now is yes. We're really excited to say that if you have a prescription for your eyewear, we can now accommodate you over at Wild RX. So all you have to do is go to wildrx.com, and as a very special thanks for being one of the first people there, you can take 10% off your order at checkout by using the code YOUROCK. That's YOUROCK, all one word. And if you have any questions about Wild RX, go ahead and drop us a line. You can always email over at abel@fatburningman.com or just reply to my newsletter, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that might come up. I'm really proud of what we've done over at Wild RX. For most of you just getting started with blue blocking glasses and lenses, I would encourage you to take a look at the yellow daytime variety of lenses. We also have a red nighttime variety that's a little more aggressive with the blue blocking, but the yellow daytime lenses are really helpful throughout the day, in the morning before the sun is up, also at night And if you don't need that full spectrum blockage with the red lenses, then it's really important, I find, for color differentiation and just to help yourself relax. If you do find that you're watching Netflix or you're on a computer, if you have to look at a screen and it's just making you squint, giving you that like mild headache that I know I get, especially after dark when you look at those fluorescent lights and those screens, throwing these yellow daytime blue blockers on can really be helpful. And then if you are someone who's been using blue blockers for a while and you want really aggressive blue blocking coverage, then check out these monster red aviators. I really enjoy these when I wake up early in the morning and I start playing music, but I have to be on the computer to play my synthesizer or play different instruments or whatever. I try to block all of that aggressive, annoying blue light with these puppies right here. So take a look at those. One more time, all you have to do is go to wildrx.com. And if you want 10% off at checkout, use the code YOUROCK. That's YOUROCK. I really hope that you like our new project at WildRx. Right now, we're only in the US, hopefully international, a little at a time soon. But for those of you who are stateside, I'm really proud of what we're doing over at WildRx. Please go check it out. All right, on to the show with Stewart Dixon. We're chatting about how to be a spiritual badass and find your inner peace, why you should consider a vacation from the sound of your own voice, how to swap social media for good habits, getting started with meditation, how to do a quick body scan, and tons more. Now, here's a quick note for those of you out there who might be driving or operating heavy machinery or what have you. In this interview, Stewart will actually be walking us through a guided meditation to demonstrate body scanning. So just a little word of caution. If you are driving, for that part, either pull over and park the car for a few minutes if you want to do the exercise, or save the exercise for later. And also, Stewart has some colorful language in this interview, and we've done our best as usual to keep it family friendly and bleep it out, but for the most part, it's pretty low key. So I hope you dig this episode with Stewart. Let's go hang out with him. All right, folks, today we're here with Stewart Dixon, a modern-day mindfulness teacher, musician, blogger, and author of Spirituality for Badasses, which is a #1 bestseller on Amazon. Jay has a degree in communications and engineering and teaches based on his nearly 30 years of direct experience with numerous unorthodox teachers. Thanks so much for joining us on the show, Jay.
Thanks for having me, Abel. It's really good to be here, man.
I love that you've studied with so many unorthodox teachers and kind of made your way around, because there is a tendency for a lot of people who get into the spiritual side of things to kind of just get sucked into one edge of it and never really bounce around that much and see the relationships and what they share, the differences. So maybe you can just start right there. How did you get into the oddball side of spirituality?
That's a great question. Yeah, you can get caught in an eddy, right? As you're traveling down the spiritual river, it's real easy to get caught in an eddy with one teacher or with one type of teacher. And then what's really tragic about that is then that gets you stuck. And my own experience was, I guess this comes from, our previous conversation before hitting the record button here, is my predilection to being right-brained, and to think outside of the box and to be creative. And so I apply that same, I guess, fearless, creative, crazy approach to teachers. So I sat with a lot of different, I met Ram Dass one time while he was in his wheelchair smoking a cigarette out before a conference. And that was way cool. Just, hey, how's it going, man? Just like nothing much, but it was just kind of inspiring.
Totally.
I've sat with many of the teachers that I worked with, are based in sort of this new movement of teachers that has been spearheaded for the last couple of decades in America, that you've probably heard of, like Eckhart Tolle, Adyashanti, Gangaji. I think there's a pretty big guy, although he's not quite my cup of tea, but he teaches the same type of thing. His name is Muji. So we're talking about non-dual Zen spirituality. And within that, and the ones that I just spoke of are kind of like the they're in the, they're in the top 10. But there's a whole host of other teachers that are in the top 100 or whatever that I found was really, they were very accessible. And some of these guys were like, I mean, just Harley Davidson riding, potty mouthed, in your face. One particular teacher was just like rough and tumble. But by that time that I had sat with this guy, he was the only guy you go to a, like this, you're used to these sat songs they're called, where these meditations where you go with these teachers and you sit with them. And this is the only guys who up to this point, I had never heard a satsang teacher say during their spiel, because most of the time it's very, kind of like this. Boy, I was impressed and I really, really liked it. And it just kind of tickled me. And so, I sat with quite a few unorthodox teachers. If you've ever heard of Andrew Cohen, he was pretty big for quite some time. And I met him a few times and he was great. And I just, he was definitely, he's also a musician too. So all of I guess I just didn't have a taste, Abel, for being or hanging out with one person exclusively. I looked at it as like, this is college. I want to hear about all of the different ways and methods from a variety of different teachers. Here's the other thing too. No teacher is perfect. All teachers still have some degree of ego, and they're always going to have shadow that appears in their teaching, in their work, so you got to learn to take the good stuff and chuck out the bad stuff. And what happens is, if you sit with a whole bunch of and hang out with and read a whole bunch of teachers and authors and coaches, you're going to create in your own internal psychology, your own body mind, the greatest hits that work for you. And that's sort of what I did.
So the never meet your hero cliche it is an interesting one, because it's happened a few times to me where I just put this person on an altar, and I've idolized them because I've read their book or I've listened to their music or whatever. Maybe they were a great teacher of some other kind. And then I meet them and they're totally real world, like so much so I don't want to spoil it, but just the most human stuff you could possibly imagine, being really short with people, being, even if you've read something that they've written, sometimes their voice can be completely different, right? So I wouldn't say necessarily, though, that I would wish that I hadn't met them, because those experiences and what I learned about that edge that they have, maybe that's where some of their spiritual strength comes from as well. That critical mind, that bitterness leads them down a beautiful path eventually.
I always, to talk about music here again, I always have looked at spiritual teachers as like musicians. Some teachers are just destined to be Madonnas or U2s or Bruce Springsteens. They have big followings, they write big books, and then others are just local jazz musicians. They're both musicians. They both have something very valid to offer. It's just that, I still, been doing this for a really long time, and I'm amazed at the variety of how spirituality and blossoms in an individual in its own unique way, and then is displayed or is conveyed through that individual, should he or she decide to teach, in such a variety of beautiful and awesome ways. And I think I was talking to somebody yesterday. I had this little black book, like, when I was in my 20s, like, which most guys have a bunch of girls' names in. I had a bunch of spiritual teachers. So that was my like go-to. I just was like, I loved hanging out with, reading their stuff with a variety of them, and I gained a lot from doing so.
And you can't just appreciate one side of them, right? Or at least you're going to be losing out if you try to approach it that way. Having deeply meaningful and human relationships is something that feels like it's going away, doesn't it? But having one of those with a spiritual teacher, that's oftentimes what they teach you with a heavy hand. And sometimes that can be shocking, right? Especially from like the Zen tradition, getting like knocked over the head with a stick or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I had a number of teachers slap me in the ass, slap me in the face. I remember it's good. It's like, get off your high horse. You're way too much in your head. And you're being an ass.
Yeah, it's playful. It's not something that's like actually knocking you down.
Exactly. But there is a what is it? The truth will. I forget who said that. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off,
Yeah.
which is a really great quote. And
Mhm.
so it's inevitable, and it's part of the process that you get a little defensive, that you get a little pissed off, that you get, with when you're working with teachers. But if they're smart and they're good at their job, they're like, okay, I'm pulling back a little bit here, and I'm just gonna, be a little bit of a lion instead of a lamb today because I think you need this, Mr. Dixon. So slap, slap, and it was effective for me. I had that a number of times where like, it's about our defenses as an ego and our personality and us not wanting to be intimate or vulnerable or really have really get into the deep side of our shadow, which it's a weird thing. You have to trust. You have to be in a good space. You have to feel as though you're in a safe space, and paradoxically, to be in a safe space to allow that teacher to then uh, help to dismantle you, to knock you around a little bit, and then that he or she. Here's the thing, and he's doing it with love, right? Like a parent. That's all. So.
Yeah. And it seems like in this online world, especially of social media, now of censorship and just kind of algorithms, that they're trying to excise a part of the human, the complete human in some ways. And how do you feel about that? How do we address it? How do you work on the shadow outside of the internet?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the elephant in the room is COVID, which has just kicked all of our asses in terms of intimacy. And I mean, my son, he's 14. He's in the year and a half that he did not go to school and stayed at home. I think he made one friend. So use that as an example for the rest of us who have lacked in, intimacy and meeting new people. And my wife and I always joke like, yeah, after this, we're gonna go visit the new friend store. So yes, Abel, yes. It becomes pretty if you're trying to work with shadow on and you're with individuals on it can work. It can work, and I do it. It's a little more difficult because of course you're going to get the juiciness of the body language, of the eye contact, of the just sort of general vibe when you're with someone else. So I think that as an author, teacher, and coach, you work with what you have and are grateful if it actually does arrive to a point where somebody that you've been working with, let's say online, can be someone that you meet in person. And so, to answer your question, how do you work with individuals in person? It's just a lot easier. And um, I don't know if you want me to answer. That's a whole the how-to part is a huge.
Let's start with another thing that a lot of people aren't doing, which is just creating space. And a lot of people talk about meditation, and that can get into a lot of semantics, but even just taking a quiet time, taking a little space, closing your eyes, not having anything interfering with your senses, really. Uh, is so important now, but also one of those forgotten things. I think it's wrapped up in almost every spiritual teaching that you have to do that in some form. But now, for as much talk, buzz as it gets, I don't think that many people are actually creating that silent space in their lives. And when I read in your book, The Day of Silence, I'm just it shook me because growing up in New Hampshire without much to do and without many people around, especially being a kid, like we would spend hours and hours, sometimes a whole day without talking to anyone, and it wasn't anything special. Now that would be the most outrageous thing in the world.
Yeah, I've been on silent retreats, and you don't really know how much energy that you're um, letting go by speaking and talking all day long. The silent retreat that I went on was amazing. I went on a couple of them, for 4 or 5 days. And it wasn't completely silent, I should say that first of all. There was always the opportunity to talk in a more formal setting. But the rest of the time, when you left the meditation hall, or you left I actually went on a silent retreat on a river. So when you got back in your canoe, yeah, you don't know what a vacation is until you take a vacation from the sound of your own voice.
That is so
So
true.
I mean, it's deeply relaxing to not to go for a day or two without in silence and speaking. Now that's a special occasion which you have to arrange and you have to pay for,
Right. Right.
and not everybody can do that. So then how do you? Let's back way up for those who aren't even quite there to want to do something like that. Well, the first thing you can do is just put your phone down for a few minutes in the morning while you're drinking your coffee. Don't have your coffee with your phone. Leave your phone. Go have your coffee outside. Listen to the birds for 5 or 10 minutes. Do
Yeah.
that. Have a. I have a policy. I have my phone is kind of like it's basically a no-fly zone around me. My cell phone. You can call me. You can text me, and you better be a friend or a relative, and that's it. There's no Facebook on my phone. I have no social media on my phone. It's not getting dinged all day long. I'm not neurotically checking it all day long. So that right in and of itself is a way where you clear up some space to address your original, question or comment. Yes, we live in a society in an age right now where being constantly distracted is accepted, and it's sold, and it's absolutely normal. And mostly what I'm talking about is distracted, of course, by digital devices. But I mean, you can be distracted by any number of kind of flimsy things. So I suggest that there's good distraction. There's kind of like beneficial, healthy distraction, like playing your guitar, right?
Hmm.
That's good
Absolutely.
distraction. That's really good distraction. You're focused, it's a little meditation, you're in your right brain, you're in the moment. Anything that draws you into the moment is really, really good. That relaxes the left brain and puts you more in the present, in your present body space. I fly fish. I love to get in a river, walk down a river, with feeling the water on my legs and hearing the birds and the flow of the river. I mean, there's no more zen for me than that. There's no more present moment than that. So sports, athletics, outside, all good ways of doing that in um, our stressful, jam-packed schedule. I guess it just boils down to this. If you're interested in spirituality and you want to invite something bigger into your life, something's got to give. It's as simple as that. Something's got to move the out of the way for that thing to come in, and it starts by small things. Cut out TV in the evening by an hour or two. Watch an hour at night, and don't for the other 2 hours. Find something else that's more healthy for you to do: reading, biking, fly uh, you know.
What's interesting though is when you need those things the most, maybe this is just me, you want to do them the least, right? Like when you're really in that trough, when you're really down, you don't, there's so much like, uh, resistance for some reason against going fly fishing or against just playing guitar. You have to build that, is what I'm saying. You have to build those connections. And every time you move, or every time life throws you a curveball, or every time you need to get a pair of new shoes, or your shorts are dirty so you can't go out, you have to navigate around those. So how do you keep those habits in the face of all this craziness that life throws at us?
You have to want to do it because the benefits outweigh not doing it. It has to feel good. I always am advocating that.
The delayed benefits sometimes, though, right?
Yeah, but there's a way that I think you could small step into the process where, like, let's take, the big one, the big one in the room, meditation or finding time for silence. Or, I mean, if you're, and I talk about this in Spirituality for Badasses, no one wants to sit and have their butt cheeks go numb and in some stupid pose that you don't even know what it's supposed to do. No one, really deep down, do we really want that and sit and listen to our mind? And no one wants that. No one wants to sit there and grind through a half an hour of your leg falling asleep because they're crossed. No one wants that. So how can you make that an enjoyable experience? And it's about finding the type of meditation that works for you. And I advocate this in Spirituality for Badasses, and it worked for me in my life. I never really sat formally with my eyes closed. It just didn't do it for me. I would always, like, if I was with a teacher or what, it was just eyes open, breathe deep, and a little bit at a time. And it's really easy to, phone apps, etc., to have guided meditations, to have someone just for a short period of time. You will notice that what happens is, yes, Abel, of course, there is a little bit of going to the gym where and that's why you only do it for a couple of minutes, because beyond that, in the beginning, it's just going to start to suck. But for a few minutes, if you can find this, zone that feels good, then you're going to want to go back to I remember very distinctly when I was in my 20s of, having these. I lived on a farm, and I would go out to this barn that overlooked this field, which is sort of an ideal place to sit and find some peace. But it wasn't always the case. I'd go out there and the setting was near damn perfect, but it would take me a couple of minutes to drop into this space that felt really good. And let me describe what I mean by feel good. Meditation should be you're breathing, you're just relaxed, sort of like the way I'm sitting right now. I'm just sitting comfortably here. And when you meditate, you just feel your body, you feel your breath, you're deeper, you breathe deeper into your heart. And what slowly can happen is that your peripheral vision sort of opens up, and you drop and you relax, and it just starts to feel really good. The all the mind stuff sort of drops to the background. So that's how it is for me. And of course, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can't expect somebody who's new to this to have that type of experience. But at least I can be and you and anyone else who's done it for a little while can be an inspiration to others and say, trust me, yeah, it's a little, you go into the gym first couple of days, it's the next day your muscles are going to ache. But try it for a couple of weeks, and you'll see, lo and behold, you'll see what happens is that ache turns into something that is really, really good. So that's how I approach it. Either you want this or you don't. None of this works. Here's the bottom line that I think that the readers of Spirituality for Badasses, and I think most people who get involved in spirituality, if there isn't something at the back end pushing you to want to do it, like suffering, depression, anxiety, stress, something is missing from your life. If that voice hasn't showed up, then you're probably not going to, because you kind of need both. You need to have that pushing you from behind, and then you have to have something on the front end drawing you to like a greater possibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It's just funny how a lot of people think of meditation as wasted time, or there's no time to do it because the day is so full of things where they're achieving something or they're doing something and it's so packed. Whereas if we took a real look at it, if we took like we do a body scan, maybe we can talk about that next. If we took a true scan of our time online, let's say, or in front of media, there's a lot of opportunity to just swap 5, 10, 20 minutes for something else, even if it is empty space. Because if that time online, which we're learning, especially with social media, is making you feel worse, then it's kind of doing the opposite of meditation. That is, even if meditation is wasted time, which I would disagree, that's better than getting hurt by using your time on social media.
Yeah. You just have to grow up. It's just as simple as that. Yeah. You just got to grow up. I mean, at some point, someone's going to say to you, and you're either going to listen to them or you're not going to listen to them. Eating at McDonald's every day is bad for you. Smoking cigarettes every day, bad for you. Drinking half a bottle of tequila or vodka every day, probably bad for you. Being on social media 6 hours a day, yeah, bad for you. I mean, and you're either going to get that or you're not going to get it. And I think that what it takes. See, here's my stick as the author of Spirituality for Badasses is, I say it right in front of the book. Hey man, speaking of tequila, I still like to drink tequila. I like to smoke cigars in my hot tub. I like, great sex. I like all of the normal outward things that most, human beings like. I like all of those things, but they ultimately don't define who I am. Those are kind of like the peripheral things on the outside. It's about discovering who you truly are on the inside. That it's this little island that you find that in the hurricane of life is always there. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, my shtick and my the approach that I advocate is that yeah, you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. Sort of.
That's what I preach too. If you can moderate, and we are built differently. Like I'm talking to someone later today who specializes in and studied and teaches about addiction. And one of the things that I feel like we all get tripped up on is arguing, well, you can just eat one square of chocolate or one potato chip or something. And the truth about it, maybe some people can build discipline and build themselves up, but then some other people, not so much. Like I'm thinking of some people close to me in my life who just have to set up different habits because the idea of having one glass of wine is just a little too tempting. So for people with those tendencies out there, how do you arrange your life in a way to make sure that you're not pulled terribly off track?
Well, you've got to honor that and acknowledge that, yes, you're an addict, that you've got an issue with that substance, first of all, and do the right, good, and conventional things to address it. AA, therapy, etc., doctor, do all of that. That is totally legit, and then that's part of your life. You don't touch that. You don't do that. That's not something that you do. And then there you go for that particular set of people. Then the good news is that what you are after in those things is available to you in other ways. So when I'm in a really good meditative space, and I'm in a pretty good one right now, as a matter of fact, always doing these interviews just kind of like drops me into a good zone. It feels really damn good, and is a good contender for all this good stuff that you get from the substances that we're speaking of. So
Yeah, I've said this before, but I I have no better feeling than after I've done like a hard hike or run out in nature. It's outside, you hear those birds, you're exhausted, maybe you're hurting a little bit or a little sore or whatever, but there's no there's no substance I've ever taken that has made me feel as good. Because if you think about what it feels like to be drunk, it's not good. Like maybe one glass of wine, maybe a little bit is good. But so often when we go into these states or go into these benders or whatever it is, like the actual state that we're chasing or that we wind up in isn't a good one. But there's nothing that beats how you feel after a solid workout in my mind, especially outside.
yeah, and I think one of the things that I've tried to share with people, and again, to be down where they are, if we're going to talk about, if we're talking about alcohol and addiction, I actually take, it's sort of a humorous chapter of Spirituality for Badasses. I take the reader into a biker bar. We go up to the bar. There's big crowded burly guys and motorcycles out front, and we loud rock and roll, and it's called Lucky's Two-Stroke Biker Bar. We sit down, and there's Lucky, who's the owner of the bar, and I asked for 5 shots of tequila and 2 beers. And what I do, again, is to share and to meet people where they are, and to be really real about this stuff. It's like, okay, we're gonna get mindfully drunk off of tequila, and I'm gonna show you that there's a part of you that even while you're drunk is actually not drunk. I'm going to show you that there's a part of you that is okay, that is at peace, that is fine, that doesn't need the alcohol, that doesn't need it. But I'm totally willing to, let's, for a few minutes, let's party. Okay, but we're going to do so in the wisest way that you possibly can imagine. So that's a part of the book that I'm super proud of, because it basically says, I feel you, brother. I feel you. I get it. Why in this up world and life, who the hell wouldn't want to drink, right? Who wouldn't? Holy shit. I totally feel you. So I'm there with you, man. I can work with you on that. So let's see if we can tweak that a little bit, turn that around so you aren't an alcoholic, so that you are in control of life and it's not controlling your life. And then beyond that, let's see if we can find something else that's already part of who you are, that's totally badass and totally okay without the alcohol, without marijuana, without nicotine.
Or overeating, because so often these things bounce from one to another, right?
Oh yeah, pornography, bad eating. And I mean, it could be, you could be freaking gluten-free, vegetarian, breatharian, whatever, and you can still eat too much of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can still stuff yourself even with really good stuff. So, pornography, overeating, nicotine, all those things is you are not going to gain spiritual insight by giving everything up in your life. That's bullshit. I'm not talking about living in a cave. That's bullshit. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about moderating it, as you said, of being an adult about it, of having a healthy relationship to these things. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I'm 52 years old. Still every once in a blue moon, have a cigar in my hot tub. Every once in a blue moon, I'll smoke pot in my hot tub. Every once in a blue moon, have a shot or two of whiskey or tequila.
Very nice.
Nothing wrong with moderation. So.
Agreed. It doesn't mean that you have to live the rest of your life in silence, saying no to everything. Hopefully there's a way to get yourself under control so that you don't keep like bouncing from one addiction to another, which is usually kind of chasing a state or brain chemicals, right? And I would apply this to caffeine and things that are supposed to be uppers, which I usually don't take aside from, caffeine. There's nothing that kind of brings me up to a higher level of arousal more than like having to go on camera or perform on stage. And like almost every time beforehand, I have crippling anxiety, but then it just like ramps all up and it's like, oh, good thing I've been here before. I know where this goes. All right, let's go. And then it's just, after a few minutes, you're in the flow of it. And that flow and that kind of delivering on your own promises, that makes you feel a lot better than having too much caffeine or too much booze or too much food or whatever else you're chasing, right?
And that's the flow you're after in your spiritual pursuit. And whether that's doing a body scan meditation or an exercise with a teacher or even reading a book, you can read a book and get into the flow. And it's always, you have to go through that little gateway. You have that little gateway of the little kid, that's in all of our heads, the whiny little kid that doesn't, I don't want to do this, and just like when you experience anxiety before going on stage, well, that's just that's just that part of you, your little, reptile brain that freaks out, but you're bigger than that, you're better than that, and you've experienced it, Abel. I've experienced it. It's like, shut up. Once you get out there and start playing, it's going to be awesome. Once you sit down and get over your whininess and get over, be a badass, okay? Have some courage. I know you don't want to do it, but be a badass. Sit down, try doing a body scan meditation. And for the first few minutes, you'll feel uncomfortable, etc., but see what happens.
Maybe we can do a quick one right now because it's something that I don't do enough
Sure.
of. Even if I do sit down, I'm not truly going to every part of my body and checking it out. It's like I'll look for the obvious stuff and then I just kind of go on to the next thing, trying to float on stars or do something that's a little more wacky in my head, right? But it's really important to, before you go skyrocketing into psychonautics, to actually be honest about where your body's at. So for some of the people who are familiar and even those who aren't, maybe we could do a little quick experience where you're scanning your body and seeing how it is.
Sure. So I'll guide you through this. We'll just do like, 2 or 3 minutes. Start with 3 deep breaths. Have your eyes open and just watch with Abel and I. Just put have your eye contact with us. So 3 deep breaths. Inhale 1. Inhale 2. Inhale 3. So the first thing that you do is just allow everything to be here. You're not trying to change anything. Allow uncomfortableness to be here, awkwardness to be here, nervousness, being bored. That's good. So you accept everything. That's key. Where you just are, if you're hurting, allow that to be here. Allow everything to be here. And then you do a little scan of your whole body. So you start with your feet. You place your attention and your awareness on your toes of both feet, on the ankles and the tops and the bottoms of both feet. Simply noticing, simply watching, feeling, noticing all the details, temperature, the pressure of the shoe, etc. We're going to do this the whole body. We go up to the shins, the calves. Just notice, pay attention. Go to the knees, back of the knee, the side of the knee. Simply noticing, simply watching. We go to the thighs. Remember to breathe. Back of the thigh, bottom of the thigh, sides of the thighs. Simply noticing, seeing, being aware. We're doing this. You want to be present to the body, because this thing that Abel and I have been talking about, this whole podcast, is this aware part of you. This aware part of you is closest ever to the body. And when people talk about spirituality, they always talk about being in the present moment, right? This awareness. I want to be, here and now. Well, guess what's always in the present moment? Your body. Your body's always in the present moment. So the more we can notice our body and be present with our body and see each little bit of it, the more we get drawn into the present moment, the more we get drawn into awareness. And the more that awareness comes into focus. So now we're going to place our attention and our awareness on our groin, our genitals, our bottom. Then we'll move to our stomach, solar plexus, lower back. Just notice everything there. Tension, no tension, hot, cold. Then we'll move to our chest, our heart, our upper back. Breathing. Notice how your chest goes in and out when you breathe. Notice your heart, whatever you feel there. Allow thoughts to come and go. Allow any emotions that might be coming up.